This is Play-by-Playcast,
Is that faster than a Greyhound?
the podcast about play-by-play guys, for play-by-play guys, by, I'm told, a play-by-play guy.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Now here's the host of Play-by-Playcast, Tom Bodett. Wait, the Motel 6 guy?
We'll leave the light on for you.
No, Joel Godet.
Joe Godet.
Joel
Joel?
with an L.
Okay, here's your host, Joel Godet.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
All right, back at it on a Friday morning, another edition of Play-by-Playcast. It is the podcast about play-by-play broadcasters for play-by-play broadcasters, hosted by a play-by-play broadcaster. It's a professional development podcast diving into the tips, tricks, experience, stories, process, and preparations of some of the biggest and best play-by-play announcers in the business. As always, my name is Joel Godet. You can find the podcast on social media at PXPcast, or you can hit us up via email, jgodett at bsu.edu. I'm on Twitter as well, too, by the way. I don't know why I skipped that. At Joel Godet. So at PXPcast, at Joel Godet, or jgodett at bsu.edu. Our guest today is Mik Mixon. He is the voice of the Carolina Panthers, and we'll get to Mick here in just a second. But before we do that, it is that time of year again, folks. It is July 27th as we drop this podcast, and the summer is over. Dunzo. Like, we are not even in August. There is, when I was a kid, used to have July session of sleepaway camp and August session of sleepaway camp. Now you're an adult, and there's no August. August, not part of summer. Ball State football had its Mid-American Conference Media Day Tuesday in Detroit, so I had a chance to go up to Ford Field and talk to coaches and players and administrators and the like and broadcasters about Mid-American Conference football and kind of start turning the gears toward football season, which we will do full-fledged next week. Tuesday, players report. Wednesday is the first day of Ball State football fall training camp. Our guest today, Mik Mixon, like training camp, full go. It is already underway as far as the NFL is concerned. Football season is upon us, and as broadcasters, that's a terrifying thought. that summer period goes by all too quickly. The other thing is, like, I don't even have a buffer. CrossFit Games are next week. So CrossFit Games, then football training camp, and then August 30th, Ball State football kicks off with Central Connecticut State. So it is fully here. Summer is gone, and we're back into the period of time of doing what we do, doing what we love, and what drives us each and every day. So that's the exciting part of it. But time for rest, relaxation, and earlier nights is over. With that being said, let's dive into our guest today. Mik Mixon is the play-by-play voice of the Carolina Panthers, and he's been that since 2005. So this is his 13th or 14th season with the Panthers, and before that held a number of jobs. Most notably worked for the Tarheels Sports Network. He was a color analyst to the late, great Woody Durham. He also broadcast in minor league baseball in Maine and worked for some local radio stations in North Carolina and South Carolina. And in 1999, he was the North Carolina Sportscaster of the Year. Also, and we don't get into this on the podcast, which, like, shame on me, Mick also plays in a band on the side. He is the drummer for the Franklin Street Band, which is where he met his wife, by the way. I believe his wife is the lead singer. And they were not together, and then they were in a band, and now they're together. So, you know, chicks dig drummers. That's why I was trying to be a drummer when I was little. And I'm just not coordinated enough to do different things with my hands and feet, let alone different things with one hand and the other, and then a foot and another foot. I can't do four things at once. Like, they all move in unison. He's a drummer. He drums for a band on the side. But we will talk not about that today. We'll talk about his ideas of play-by-play, the way he preps, the way he calls games, all of our usual usual cast of subjects, and we will, as we have with a lot of NFL guys, dive into his coverage and his broadcasting of the grandest stage of them all. He broadcast Super Bowl 50 back when the Panthers fell to the Denver Broncos, so we'll talk with Mik Mixon about getting a Super Bowl under his belt. Also about the analyst play-by-play relationship, obviously coming up through the ranks as an analyst on the Tarheels Sports Network. What was it like to be in that role? How does that role influence what he does now? And also, what was it like working with Woody Durham? What Woody Durham meant to him, how he helped his career, and what he has learned from Woody and applied that to his career over time as well. A lot of great subjects, topics, and conversations with Mik Mixon. He is guest 112 on PXPcast.
When I was a little Mik Mixon growing up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, my original goal, maybe like you, was to be the doer of the great deeds, the roller inner of the clutch, 8-foot side. He'll win the green jacket, the left-handed reliever coming in out of the pen, throwing gas on the black. But my mother smoked and drank so much during my gestation that I ended up with this ectomorphic body type. And so I realized I had been cheated out of the genetics that were to propel me to a great career in the NBA or the NFL. So ever since I was about 10 years old, I just had this feeling that this, if I'm able to, this is what I want to do. I want to be a sports broadcaster. I want to be that guy that carries a tape recorder and a notepad around and tries to tell the stories. And my strident belief has always been that it's not about us. I know sports announcers have some notoriety. If Jim Nantz or Dick Vitale, or we could name 24 others, walked into the room, the dynamic in that room would probably change. But I've always felt as though if it's done right, we're the conduit through which true notoriety travels, as opposed to the games existing so people can tune in to watch us and hear us talk.
Yeah, let me dive into that right off the top. I don't mean to get too nitty-gritty, but from a storytelling standpoint, what is it that you love about how this medium allows us to tell stories and just the nature of being able to tell somebody's story?
Well, radio's, to me, is the best medium, and I'm no social scientist, but I'm almost 60 years old. I'll turn 60 in October, Joel. So I remember when the internet came to be and when cell phones became popular, and now we have the smartphone. The millennial brain consumes entertainment. The millennial brain decides what is entertaining in an entirely different way. So, but through all of it, with cord cutters, with people wanting to get their information in smaller and smaller bites, the attention span shrinking down, radio rises to the top. I mean, it's portable, it's personal, it's there when you want it. You can put it down, pick it up at your leisure, and carry it with. You can carry us with you anywhere you go. Additionally, our television colleagues are still trying to artificially inseminate the kind of interplay that comes so much more naturally on the radio. TV's trying to invent it, and they're trying to say, okay, well, here we come back from break. Okay, Howie, you and Terry make fun of Strahan's tooth, and then we're going to go to a break, and it's all planned out and it's scripted. And to me, anyway, it feels that way. Where radio, I love our broadcast because I hope anyway that we create on the Panthers radio network that our goal is to create a meeting place where you can come, hang out, eavesdrop on our conversation, visit with us a little bit, as opposed to sounding like caricatures of sports announcers sent over from central casting who aren't listening to one another and who talk in this Ron radio kind of stupid, asinine way.
I always talk about doing a broadcast as when somebody drops in, I want them to be informed and I want them to be entertained. And if they come in and they know what's happening in the game and they've learned something new and they've laughed, it's been a good day. When you talk about it being a meeting place, is that kind of the approach that you take for what a good 4 hours on a Sunday is like for you?
Absolutely. And then the game tells us when it's permissible. We don't tell the game when we're going to tell the story about the Batgirl and the hot dogs and the popcorn machine or whatever it is. The game lets us know when there's a place to put a bookmark there and stop for a second and tell a story, to weave a yarn, to build the drama. I think it's exactly what you said. I think that sports in the South, and I've always been a Southerner. I'm from North Carolina. I've lived in Maine. I've lived in some other places, but in the South, football isn't just what we do. It's a huge part of who we are. And baseball, basketball, soccer, really the same. And sports is one of the few places you can go where someone somewhere hasn't already authored the ending. And I think it has a hold on us. It brings people together. It's just a fantastic. I always say I feel like I work in the toy store, and I love what our news and weather fraternity members do, but I couldn't do it. I love it here in the candy store of sports broadcasting.
Let me go back to the thing about, doing something where the ending hasn't been authored already, and how you, I don't want to say, how you plan out your arc of a broadcast. When you sit down and you go into a game and you think to yourself, this is what I'm watching, this is what I'm looking for, these are themes that I want to be able to paint consistently over the course of the game as long as it allows, and then obviously let the action take you where it will. But kind of what's your approach of how you're going to write the book before you open up that cover on game day, and then how you kind of maintain consistency and weave it through what happens in front of you?
Well, let me start at the end, because my approach begins with the end of the book, which is don't super glue your rear end to it, because it can change in one play. Somebody gets hurt, somebody sprains an ankle, somebody gets carted off, starts pouring down rain, starts snowing, all your best laid plans all through the week with all the meetings, all the tape you've watched, all the coaches you've talked to, all of a sudden now it can change. So you got to hang loose and not take your pre-game plan too seriously. Also, you can't try to fit in everything that you've prepared to speak of, because that sounds, to me, that forces a pacing on a listener that might be artificial. So generally, I'll end up using, I don't know, a quarter of what I prepare to take during a game, maybe a fifth of it. But as the old saw goes, you never know which fifth of which 20% you're going to need. So you got to have 100% of it. And then my belief is also that this should be fun. These games should be fun. They're enjoyable. Sure, we take them seriously. There's a lot at stake. But that when the game begins, we ought to have at least enough neurons to rub together to figure out a way to give the listener, the one listener, and I can't stand hello, everyone, welcome back, everybody. I think that misses an opportunity, particularly on radio, to communicate with people one-on-one. We know there's more than one person listening, we hope anyway, but they're only listening one at a time. So can we give that guy, that girl, that kid, that mom, in the first 20, 30 seconds of the broadcast, can we give them a reason to be interested in it? It may be a nuance of the strategy of the game. It may be a matchup problem one team will create. It may be the rivalry component. It may be what's at stake for the winner or the loser, but there's something in every game that's enticing. And it's not good enough to just come on and have this watery diarrhea spew out of our mouths and say, you're looking live at Soldier Field in Chicago, Illinois, where today the Chicago Bears host the Miami Dolphins. That's not good enough, in my view.
And the better that plan is from the get-go, too, I have to imagine makes you more adaptable when things go wrong. If you've got a better idea of where you want to go from the beginning and something gets a wrench thrown into it, somebody gets hurt, you've got to go in a different direction, the more comfortable you are with your plan, and the more comfortable, and I mean that generally, the more comfortable you are with your team, the more comfortable with the storylines, that's going to make your life easier to kind of reroute your story, is it not?
Agreed. And then I don't have any problem at all challenging, not in a abrupt, confrontational way. It could be confrontational if you're so moved, but I don't have any problem challenging my color man. On our network, we work with Eugene Robinson, who played 16 years in the NFL. Sometimes Eugene will say something that makes no sense to me. And so I don't have any problem saying, now, wait a second, hold it. Or even if he says something simple, like, this bail technique against this route combination isn't working, and I'll say, well, wait, okay, go back. What's a what's a bail technique? What's cover two? What's a China route? Because people don't know. Some people do, but some people don't. So I find that if people have the idea that they're not really sure what you're going to say, that you might say that it's a little loose, you might say anything, or you might ask this color guy anything, then they want to listen for just a half a beat longer.
How do you do that tactfully sometimes, too? If something is said where you're like, all right, I'm going to push back on that a little bit, and I'm sure part of that is just having a good relationship with the people you work with and going back to having that kind of forum and conversation probably makes it easier.
Yeah, I don't believe in tact. There's no time for that. So a lot of times, for example, with Eugene, I'll say, Jeannie Rob, because Eugene Robinson, we call him Jeannie Rob. I'll say, yeah. Jeannie Rob, I love you, but I could not disagree with you more. And he'll go, okay, well, come, bring it. And I'll say, all right, in the first quarter, you said Cam Newton needed to make more plays from the pocket. Now, the last 3 plays, you're talking about how him getting out on the edge is stressing the defense. So which is it? And then let him defend his possession. He's a grown man. He can handle it.
Some would say there's the argument that, play-by-play guys stay in our lane and analysts stay in their lane and all of that. And I like where you're coming from, but it kind of blurs the line of that like preconceived notion of what we should be doing. So I guess what is the lane to you, and what is the true role of the play-by-play guy in a perfect broadcast that's done well in terms of sticking to X's and O's, but also setting up analysts and challenging analysts in a way that makes what you're hearing interesting?
Well, first of all, in my mind anyway, there's no such thing as a perfect broadcast. This is a mistake game.
True.
It's inexact. We could always rack up the tape. And the calls, if you're like me, the calls you think, oh man, I did a pretty good job on that one. That's going to sound good on the replay. Never. It always lets me down. Conversely, the times where I think, man, that sounded like the backside of a mud fence.
It works out.
It tends to maybe not sound quite. It's not quite as cringeworthy, perhaps, when the tape is played back to my ears. So to try to answer your question, it's like a marriage. I would tell any man, don't try to outwoman the woman. She's got it. She can handle it. On her worst ever day at being a woman, she's a better woman than you'll ever be as a man trying to be like to understand her. So as a play-by-play guy, don't try to be the color guy. Don't try to out-color the color guy, and don't try to analyze the play right after you've done the play, so that then all the color guy is left with is a tiny little piece on the bone to either agree or disagree with your analysis of the play you just described. Number 2, we got to listen. We got to listen like a terrier listening for a rat. We got to just have our ear cocked and be still and quiet down our own voices and our own thought engine to listen to what the color guy says, because many times our next comment is in what he or she has said. Number 3, we have to be nimble with the playing rules of the game. Nothing makes me more irritated than, well, actually one thing does, and that'll be number 4. But number 3 is got to be nimble with the playing rules. Nothing makes me more irritated except one thing, than the play-by-play guy shrieking or the color guy shrieking, he was blocked into the man, oh my God, if that's not the rule. Federation high school rules are different than college rules, which are different than pro rules. So know the rules of the game that you're broadcasting. And then number 4, and this is the thing that gives me, if you ever hear that I have flown across the room and stabbed one of my colleagues in the neck with a mechanical pencil, it will be the self-referential style. I detest the self-referential style. You do not need a self-aggrandizing signature call. You do not need there's your dagger, there's orange in the end zone. You can't paint this one purple, Pirate fans. Just call the game, call the play. You don't need let Michael Buffer have let's get ready to rumble. Let that be what it is. But you be a journalist, you be a sports announcer. Let the game tell you what word choices to make. You don't need a self-aggrandizing email handle. You don't need to be patsvoice@gmail.com. Jags P by P man. Seriously? Mick Mixon at gmail. That was taken. I don't want to see your personalized license plate where you're calling unnecessary attention to yourself, because it all just sends a bad message. So the self-referential style. Tom Brady told me last night in the hotel, just give us the story. Peter King, he refers to himself so many times in his columns that it's hard to really get it into focus of whether the column is about the pro football or about Peter King and pro football. And I guess he's earned that, but for most of us, we should just try to connect the listener, the viewer, the reader to the game.
Let me back it up a little bit on you, and I'm curious, the beginning of your career, when you were at North Carolina, you wore the analyst hat too, so you've been in both chairs of that broadcast. Number one, what did you? We'll do it one at a time. What did you think when you had an opportunity to be an analyst on an FBS and a UNC at your alma mater broadcast, and put yourself in that role?
For my overarching sentiment was, I'm a broadcaster. I know how to host a pregame show. I think I know how to build a drama. I think I know how to tell a story, but I don't know nearly enough about the strategy. I don't know nearly enough about the games and how they're officiated, from not having had the jock strap on, played left guard for old Wasamata U, played in the Poulan Weed Eater Bowl and all that. So I felt like I had to work harder to hang around the batting cage, to be in the locker room, to be at practice. I'd move the planets around if I could to get to a practice. I would drive to Winston-Salem or Durham or Maryland even, or if I could get an in-person interview with the opposing head coach, hang out, talk a little bit. I would spend my own money for coaching tapes. Mike Krzyzewski had some unbelievable, this is back in the days of the VHS, you get the cassette, big cassette that comes in the mail, the 2-part series on Coach K on his 2-3 motion offense and pressure man-to-man defense. And what a rich vein of knowledge that is for a color analyst. And then the biggest thing, Joel, was I tried to teach myself. I trained myself. And this was hard work. I mean, not hard work like taking out somebody's pancreas, but hard work in the toy store. And that is, don't watch the ball. How many people do you think are ball watchers? If there's 25,000 people watching a basketball game, if there's 70,000 people watching the football game, how many eyes are on the ball? Almost all of them.
98%.
I know, but when you watch the ball, you see nothing really. You see the point guard bringing the ball up court, and maybe he's being picked up at midcourt by a defender, but what about the 8 other guys? How are they jockeying for position? How's the defense setting up? How's the offense getting into their continuity? Same thing with football. Quarterback fades back, cocks his arm. That's great. Play-by-play guy has to watch that. But the color guy, that's the sucker. That's the slicker game, the 3-card Monty of all time. If the color guy's watching the same game the play-by-play guy is, you might as well have blinders on. So to not watch the ball, to look off the ball, that was the most fun. And actually, the color guy gets to watch a better game than the play-by-play guy does.
All right, we'll get you back to Mik Mixon here in just a second. But quickly, I want to give you a note about Audible.com. First off, here's the deal. If you go to the website audibletrial.com/PXPcast right now and sign up for a free 30-day trial, you will get 1 free audiobook to keep. So you're getting 2 free things. You will get a free 30-day trial to use Audible.com, which I'll tell you about in a second, and you will also get 1 free audiobook to keep. So 2 free things for the price of 0. The good news is you help out the podcast by using that address, audibletrial.com/PXPcast. All right, what is Audible.com? Listen, it's a website you go to get audiobooks. Somebody reads books to you. Audible.com. And if you go this week, you can listen to the book The Fix. It's an audiobook about beating the odds in life, about addiction, college life, getting caught in a downward spiral and finding a way out. Human nature at its worst and at its best. The cover art is an exploding football with money. You know who reads it? Alex Perlman. I went to college with him. The only reason I know about this book is because he posted that he has narrated this book on Facebook. So I was like, hey, that book's on Audible. I know Alex. if you sign up for a free 30-day trial on audibletrial.com/pxpcast, you can go get The Fix as your free audiobook too. So here's a good couple of things. You can help out Alex Perlman in his burgeoning career narrating audiobooks. You can help out the podcast by, signing up and letting them know you heard about it through us. And then you can test out audible.com, see if you like it, and if you do, hang around for a little bit. Back to the pod. End of ad.
How much of that, and obviously ball watching is probably, you have to do that as a play-by-play guy, but how much of that in terms of the prep and in terms of watching the tapes and the things you did to prepare yourself in a color role, would you then turn around and recommend to a play-by-play guy to give him or her a different and better perspective and just a more educated view now that you've seen it on both sides?
Yeah, if I could. I mean, maybe someday if people will be reading books, people may not even read books anymore by the time I retire in a little while, but
there'll be chips
maybe
in your
I'd
brain.
write a book on. Do what?
There'll be chips in your brain. It just downloads.
Oh gosh, yeah. Probably. I know, but I thought about sort of writing a book on the aspiring sportscaster's Bible, a guide for the aspiring sportscaster and those who love them, and tell some stories about how not to do it and the many ruts that my wheels have chalked into over a lifetime of doing this. But I think that if I could talk to the play-by-play guys, it would be try to sit in that other chair, even just to pretend. Go to a game, go to a high school game, girls volleyball, church league softball, Pop Warner football, doesn't matter. But try it yourself. What would you say if you were going to analyze the play? That will give you an incredible perspective, if you haven't done it, on what it's like to sit in that other chair. And then again, I'll tune off in a heartbeat if I hear the play-by-play guy, if I know the play-by-play guy's not listening to the color guy. Doesn't that irritate you?
Yep.
So the color guy will say something,
and he repeats.
He'll say, Mick, number 21, Mike Cook, right-hander, warming up in the bullpen. Well, right you are, Fred. And look, down in the bullpen, there's number 21, Mike Cook, warming up. I mean, what a doofus.
How is it? When you look back, what have you taken? How's it helped you? How much are you beneficial and thankful of the fact that you had that role now looking back on it years later?
I wouldn't take anything in the world for it. I came along in that role at a time when, and I don't even know how I got it. I don't know how I was able to be the color man on a major Southeastern radio network for football and basketball. And now we brought other people in. We brought in Phil Ford for a year or two, Eric Montross, Rick Steinbacher on the football side, down on the sideline. But, for the most part, I was a big part of my job was to try to analyze the game, and I tried to do that in a full, fair, accurate way. I can't stand. There's no need to be a homer. There's no need to try to scream, oh my God, or can you believe it, or are you kidding me, or any cliche like that. Because Woody, the play-by-play guy, he's already doing that. He's already got that part of the broadcast handled. So I tried to be like Wilfred Benitez, one of the great counter-punching boxers of all time. Google Wilfred Benitez up if you don't know who he is. Sugar Ray Leonard and Benitez had great fights. It was like Leonard said it was like looking into a mirror. That's how good a counterpuncher Benitez was. And I think a good color man, particularly on radio, should be able to counterpunch.
For those at home, 31 KO wins for Wilfred Benitez in his career. As I Google
there
sitting
we go.
here. Yeah. You mentioned Woody though. You weren't just an analyst. You were an analyst for Woody Durham. What did you learn about play-by-play by not doing it and by just sitting there and watching him?
Woody would get excited. He had a vocal register that he reserved for the greatest Tar Heel moments, but he also had a high vocal register for when the other team did something good. And he would occasionally get criticized for that, but he believed that the broadcast deserved that even though you might not be happy that your team lost, or that that Florida State, that Charlie Ward had made a great run and made 5 people miss, 3 of whom would later go on to play in the NFL and got the first down. But it's an exciting play, so describe it in an exciting way. Woody was great at that. Woody prepared like I don't know if anybody ever has before or since. Woody had an insistence on preparation that bordered on the unhealthy. I mean, he would, especially if it was a game that he thought may not have the gravitas. If it was we would broadcast an exhibition game. So Dean Smith Tar Heels playing the Yugoslavian national team. And I remember one instance where that came right after a football. We broadcast a football game and then hustled over to the basketball arena to do an exhibition basketball game. So Woody unpacks his spotter boards, and it looked like the wiring diagram for the space shuttle. I mean, he'd worked harder on these Yugoslavian cats than other broadcasters might broadcast in a Final Four game. And as long as I live, I'll never forget the depth and the consistency of his preparation.
What about it? What stood with you about it, and is there anything that you took from it that you still use to this day?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to be able to say, I do it the same way, but I think I'd be naive to do that. No. Woody had his own style, his own way of describing it, but you work with a guy long enough, you tend to be about as nutty as he is. So some of the things that I swore I would never do kind of can rub off on you if you're not careful. And Woody passed away back in his memorial service was the Sunday at Augusta, and he's no longer with us, but his legacy is secure as one of the all-time greats.
Is it intimidating to be the analyst, especially because you weren't coming into it with the background of a player and you had to do so much work that you talked about to get yourself to a spot where you were comfortable doing it? Was it intimidating to be the sidekick for a guy like Woody Durham coming up in your career?
It probably should have been, but I was too young and dumb to know that I should have been intimidated. Woody could be intimidating. I mean, Woody had this, he had sort of a seriousness about him. And I think that's one reason people listened to him the way they did, Joel, because the games were important to Woody. The outcome mattered to Woody. He loved playing golf. I love playing golf. We used to have these epic matches, Woody and Lee Pace against Art Chansky and me. A lot of times after a Saturday game, we'd meet out this golf course in Chapel Hill, the Governor's Club, and play 18 holes. And I remember one time seeing Woody on the first tee on Sunday morning. I said, "Woody, how you doing?" He said, "Not too good, Mick." And I said, well, why? I mean, is everything okay? Are your sons okay? Is Gene okay? I'm thinking, somebody got a bad diagnosis. Somebody was in a car wreck. He goes, "Well, I'm trying to get over that 7-point loss to Virginia, if you don't mind." And I literally had to think back, okay, Virginia. Oh, yeah. That was yesterday. The Cavaliers did beat the Tar Heels, didn't they? Well, and I had forgotten. Obviously, it hadn't affected the quality of my life because I wasn't even thinking about it. But, man, Woody, he took it personally.
How much has that carried over to you, though? Because, I've seen interviews with you where you've said, you love the Panthers, second only to your wife. How much does it help you to have that live and die with what you're watching mentality?
Well, so long as you keep it, I think it helps you, but I think you got to
in healthy perspective.
Correct. Yeah. And again, it goes back to me, it goes back to journalism. You are, do you realize how many other people within 100 miles of you would give anything to call the game you're calling? And they'd probably be pretty good at it. Maybe better than we are, but we're the ones that have been, somehow or another, we're the ones that have been trusted to represent all those people who would love to ask the post-game questions, who would love to sit in the press box if only they could. So we have to keep our heads about us. And this just in from the news desk, the Panthers occasionally catch a break. So we got to say it like that. We got to say, foot was out of bounds, but we snapped it. They didn't stop the game. Let's move on. Panthers got lucky. So I think if you have the credibility, you try to have the credibility in your listener's mind so that when you do feel like maybe you got wronged in some way, or you do want to make another point, you're not just this boy that cries wolf all the time on the air and you can't understand. I hear these calls on YouTube and other broadcasters, and they sound like when the game-ending home run or when the field goal goes to the uprights or whenever, they sound like someone has stepped on a chicken, or they sound like a little schoolgirl that's been that's had their cell phones taken away. They're just this shrieking, and I can't really understand even what they're saying. Maybe I'm old school. I don't know, but where is the value in that?
Are we journalists? Is that where do you think kind of what we do falls on the journalistic spectrum?
Well, it's slipping away. I think the journalism component is slipping away because of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and everyone is so concerned with their brand. I believe that scarcity breeds momentum. So I'm not on social media. I don't tweet. I don't blog. I may have to someday. If my employer asks me to, I will. I'm all in if they want me to. But I don't have a need to be out there saying, well, here I am. Here Joel and I are at the Ball State game. Dig me. I'm with him. My arms around him. I just think that our energies are better spent trying to learn about these athletes, learn about the coaches, learn about the officials, and broadcast the game as best we can. And then when that's over, go home and hang out with our families.
How do you walk the journalistic line, too, though, of like you're a Panthers employee, correct?
Correct.
If the going's good, it's easy, but if the going's not good, it's being able to paint the accurate picture and say what needs to be said descriptively, even if that's not the easiest thing to hear.
Well, you're right, and that's a good call on that by you. We're lucky in the Carolinas that so far, now we have a new owner, David Tepper, but Mr. Richardson, this will be my 14th season with the Panthers coming up, and in 13 seasons with Mr. Richardson, I never one time got called into the principal's office on second guessed on a word choice or, why do you sound like you turned fan on us, or why'd you say this, or why'd you say that? There's a trust factor that's involved. And then as a result, as a broadcaster, you want to work extra hard at every Rotary Club, every Civic Club, every time the mic's on to not let your employer down.
Let me go back to, if I can, the name of what was the book name that you had? That was very well thought out.
Oh, thanks. I don't know. I just was noodling around on it.
Oh, really? Okay.
And of course, I hadn't written it yet, so that's the big.
Well, yeah.
That's the little box I still have to check.
It sounded very put together for a book that hadn't totally been written. I was like, wow, he's really put some thought into this.
No, I fooled you. See, I sucked you in, and you thought I had actually had a plan. But it's the Aspiring Sportscaster's Bible, and then the next line would be a guide for the aspiring sports announcer and those who love them.
What else would be in the book, or if I sat down at Journalism 191 in North Carolina, what else would you point out as kind of your basic introduction to what we need to do in this role, or what you see done wrong in this role too much for your liking?
Well, first thing, you would learn the value of a courageous, thoughtful, open-ended question, non-self-referential question, non-statement question, non-premise question. You'd learn the value of asking questions about, not just about X's and O's and strategy, but about the emotions of these games and what feelings these games bring up for the people who play them and coach them. This is lost to us. I don't know why or how, but we've turned into this pathetic statement factory, or, Coach, you have to be pleased with this outcome. Coach, one more question, if I might. I thought your defense tonight was outstanding. Coach, turnovers. It just makes me want to go work on a pipeline somewhere, go into the landscaping business or something where at least I can trust in the skill level of the people that I'm working with. So that would be one thing. There'd probably be a chapter on taking what you do seriously, but not taking yourself too seriously. There'd be all kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't want to take up your whole podcast, but that'd be some of what I would love to write someday.
What's my favorite question when I do interviews with people is why? Just because I feel like they're going to give you an answer and make a statement, and sometimes I feel like a lot of times there's always somewhere else it can continue to go, and I feel like when you just ask simply why, you help lead them down a path that gets you a little bit of a deeper answer to what you were looking for. What are things that you like to ask of people that you feel give you a better insight into who they are and what they're thinking?
I like to ask about the human side. I like to ask, and then every interviews are different. There's the feature, there's the personality profile interview where you can get a little more long form. There's the pregame interview. Then there's the postgame interview. So there's no one size fits all. But in general, I'm like you, Joe. I like asking how did it feel and what motivated you and that kind of thing. What was it like when the door closed and you guys got in the locker room and celebrate? Just sort of the emotions, because I think this is something that women do so much better than us dumbhead men do. Men, we could spend hours and hours together, and we'll talk about we talk about Speed Week at Darlington and about the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight and about whether the Dodge Charger or the Dodge Challenger would be a better investment. Muscle cars of the late 60s and early 70s that we have loved, and we might never talk about how we feel about anything. But yet, a group of women, they get together, and in the first liter of oxygen that they use up in conversation, they're talking about their emotions. And so I think that men, we need to try to be more like that in our interview style. Let's not forget that it's the emotion of sports that attracts us to it, for Pete's sake.
Let me ask you about the biggest moment that you've. I don't know. Maybe that's an assumptive statement, but maybe the biggest moment. And I'm sure there was a good deal of emotion wrapped up in it. You've called a Super Bowl. What's that like, and how is it different than a normal Sunday at the office for you?
The pregame was unbelievable. Super Bowl 50, when Stephanie Germanotta, a.k.a. Lady Gaga, sang the national anthem with only a piano player accompanying her. And she's an exquisitely talented singer and piano player, but she had a piano player playing while she sang. So there's no Spartacus, pomp and circumstance, 30,000 people in the background dancing and confetti and M80 fireworks going off. It was just her in a very difficult, tricky song to sing, about an octave and a half range in the national anthem, and she crushed it. And she's so happy with her performance, she jumped into the keyboard player's arms. But most people didn't see that, because as she finished it, a squadron of, F-18 multi-purpose supersonic fighter jets, the Blue Angels, came screaming overhead, flying about as slow as they could possibly fly, by the way, so they could still stay in the air, so to prolong the moment. But that roar, that rumble, and then when I looked down, I saw her. It's emotional for me to even talk about. But when I saw her jump into her keyboard player's arms and hug him, she knew she had done it. And, he knew it too. They had their moment. Blue Angels flying over. They're the Panthers on one sideline, the Broncos on the other. The older I get, the more I'm unable to keep my badasstic alpha male persona and not have the emotions come back to me. It was incredible. Not to broadcast it, really, because it was nothing for me to broadcast, because it happened. We were probably in commercial break, but just to see it and feel it at the conclusion of a long NFL season, following the Panthers all around that journey, it was unbelievable. I really enjoyed it.
How do you keep from any of that getting to you in the moment? Like, how do you keep yourself in the moment in a setting like that, where there's so much going on, and it can almost be like, emotional overload or sensory overload, and being able to do what you're there to do ultimately, and with so much information and so many different, it's like too much birthday, to be able to sort through the noise sounds, I don't mean it as pejoratively as that, but to sort through the noise and still just call a game.
I don't know. I guess we did it. So I should be able to tell you how to do it, 'cause I guess we did it. But I think the answer is this, that once the game starts, the game so closely resembles other games that you've done that it just becomes that. It becomes just broadcasting a game. Now, had the Panthers won, my answer might be different. Had it come down to the last second or the last minute, then I think the oh my gosh factor comes back in when the game starts to end, and you realize again what's at stake. But for the most part, it's most of the things that could get you off stride happen in the pregame.
What's the prep like for a game like that, and how do you narrow down what you're going to read that week or 2 weeks?
Well, we were out there for the Panthers went out. It's 2 weeks, but after the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl. So we went out there. I guess I was out there in California for 8 days. And so you feel like Groundhog Day. You go to practice, get on the bus, do a bunch of interviews. The biggest problem I have is in saying no. I don't say no very well. I'm trying to be a pleaser. So, the Big Jim McBob's podcast coming out of his living room. Mick, can we get you on tomorrow morning at 6:00? Yeah, sure. Here's my number. I ended up everything from, NFL Network and the things we all do to people I never heard of before or since wanting me to come on. I try to do everything. I try to say yes to everything. So I was pretty exhausted by the time the day before the game got there. So I said to myself, here's an idea. Shut it down for 1 day prior to the game. Just hang out with your wife, go into San Francisco, do a little sightseeing. You don't have to broadcast. You don't have to do Dick Enberg's entire career in 1 day. So just shut up and get over yourself. And that worked kind of well, I think.
Let me go broad picture as I if we can bring things back to, I guess, the beginning. Did you ever think that you'd be kind of here as an NFL voice when this all started out? And now that you've got the perspective of it, for us that are on the younger side of the spectrum, what's the difference for you when you look at people that are in the league that you're in? And there's only so many of those jobs across the 4 major sports. The difference in being able to call games at that level, and those that are, I don't want to say AAA announcers, but you know what I mean, like trying to crack that next level. What's the difference? How do guys make that leap, and what's the separator? Do you think at that level?
A lot of it's luck. Because there's tons of talented guys and girls really that decide that maybe even for lifestyle reasons that they're happy at a smaller college. And had it been different for me, I just wanted to be a sports announcer. I would have been totally happy. I'm in the Southeast, so around here there's these beautiful small colleges, some big schools too, but College at Charleston or Furman or Wofford, or go on up to an ACC school, maybe a Wake Forest, Duke, certainly UNC. There's a ton of there's something magical about a college campus. So to do the games, to MC the banquets, to speak at the Rotary Club, to teach a few classes in the journalism school, the communications department, man, that's a great life. That's an incredible life well lived if it's done right. So I would say don't stress too much about work on your craft. Don't stress too much about networking and marketing and getting your name out there. Just work on being the best that you can be at this, and then trust that the system will find. Not that you still have to put yourself out there and sell yourself. I'm not saying that, but I find so many people they're so desperate to let you know that they want to work at this level that sometimes I think they miss some of the fundamentals that could make you a good employee should you get that opportunity.
Well, and miss the process, I guess, in there too. Is you're too worried about the end game to ultimately enjoy the tracks that get you to the station.
That's the metric for me. Is do you seem like a good guy? I'm on your podcast right now. One of the reasons that I'm on it, I would have been on it if you seemed like a schmuck. But one of the reasons I've enjoyed it is because you've always seemed to me on and off the air like a decent chap, like you'd be, like we could if we got stuck in an airport, we got thrown together on the same foursome on the golf course. If we broadcast the same game together in the press box, eat a meal, that time would go by effortlessly. And that's kind of what I look for in people that I listen to and in people that I recommend for jobs and hope get good jobs, is that do you have the gift of humor? Can you laugh at yourself, but yet can you be counted on to connect me to the game in a way where I feel like I'm there even though I'm not, without sounding like you're trying to win the Clio Award for meritorious broadcast.
Well, I like to think I'm a good chap sometimes, but if we're on the golf course, I don't know. It depends on how competitive you are. You might hate me after about 2 holes.
I don't know. I like the sound of that. If you want to win, I mean,
Well, no. I meant well, I mean, if we were in a scramble, I wouldn't be much of use. I pretty much can only putt.
That's like saying that I'm a stockbroker, but the only thing I can really do is pick good investments. Putting is where it's at. So I'd take you on my team anytime.
Fair enough. I just won't drive. Once we get to the green, I'll handle it. Put a windmill there, I'll be even better. It'll be awesome.
All right, that's Mik Mixon joining us here on episode 112 of Play-by-Playcast, voice of the Carolina Panthers. A lot of good things in there, but I want to touch on something he got to at the very end, which was just be good at play-by-play as broadcasters. Obviously, you have to promote yourself. That's part of the world we live in today. Social media is big. Make sure you have a presence. I mean, you listen to any podcast about successful people, not just in broadcasting, but in business and in anything. It's always about innovative ways to get yourself noticed. When you're in a job interview, how do you make somebody remember you versus the other guy? Well, there's a lot of gimmicky is not the right word, but gimmicky. There's a lot of gimmicky things you can do to stand out, to move yourself up in the world, to get yourself noticed on YouTube or on a podcast or on Play-by-Play. He's the guy that does this, and that works for a lot of people, and there are a lot of broadcasters, many broadcasters who have been good at self-promotion, which is a lot of the reason, coupled with their amazing talent, of why they get to a certain stage. But I think what Mick says there, too, is really important. You have to promote yourself at some level, but on another level, just be good at your craft. And ultimately, if you are really good, and you just continue to refine what you do, and you make it awesome, the odds are, you're not guaranteed, certainly not, but the odds are somebody's going to find you. If you work on your craft and you make the right connections and you reach out to the right people, and you're a good colleague to those around you, and you just become really, really good at play-by-play, if you're just that good and you get to the point where you can be that good, you're going to ultimately get somewhere in your career and in your life that you're happy. There is some self-promotion, certainly, that goes along with that. But I think to a certain degree, too, we do overemphasize that a little bit. And at the end of the day, just be good at what you do. Because of all things, it is the one thing you are in 100% of control of. I can be the most innovative self-promoter in the world, but I don't know how other people are going to take it. Maybe it works to somebody else finds it annoying, and somebody else just doesn't care. But if I am the most amazing, awesome, greatest play-by-play, God's gift to radio ever, that's going to get you somewhere. So just be better. Like, approach every broadcast as a chance to get better and get better. And put your head down, nose to the grindstone, and be you, and be a good person to those around you. And hopefully, the karma pays off in the end. And you've gotten good enough at your craft that somebody just has to hire you because you're that dang good. Just be good at play-by-play. Because it's the one thing of all of it you are 100% in control of. And we'll leave you with that note as we hit the season full stride here. I'm going to the CrossFit Games next week. I will be talking to you from Madison, Wisconsin. Our guest will be Paul Peck. He is the football radio play-by-play voice of the Buffalo Bulls. After that, we'll see what's in store here on the podcast. And then it's football training camp. We are full steam ahead. Until then, so long. They're playing music, so time to get up on out of here. We'll talk to you next Friday from the land of cheese and people that aren't eating it because they're really fit. I'm Joel Gannett. See ya.